Hello there. Welcome to the Keith Noble Show, brought to you by Auto Chicks and the Nobles Financial Network. Look them up on Facebook. So, we're going to talk about progressivism and the moral paradigm they present. Now, most people who are progressives never think deeply enough about it to think through any of this, understand any of this, realize any of this. That it's a different moral paradigm. The United States, by and large, you could say our moral paradigm is a Judeo-Christian paradigm. It has been for a long time. Progressives want to defeat that. And they want to defeat that because there are parts of that that they wholesale reject. The Frankfurt School. I talk about that quite often. Frankfurt School, Germany, mid-19th century, produced progressivism, Marxism, communism, socialism, Nazism, fascism. All these things came from the same ideological school, the same basic philosophy of politics, society, economics. They're all rooted in the same thing. Most progressives will reject that out of hand because they don't want it to be true, or they will talk about how they've improved on the flaws of Nazism, and communism, and fascism. That's just bogus. I'm sorry. So let's talk about some examples of this. Let's start out with race. How progressivism views race. And progressivism, by and large, embraces critical theory and intersectionality, which is premised on fictional history. Now, some things in that history are just outright fiction, but mostly, as I've talked about before, they are lies of omission. They tell you, well, this thing happened, this is an example, and that thing happened, and that thing happened. And they ignore the other 999 things that happened that would lead one to draw a different conclusion than they want you to draw from the three things or whatever they point out. That's just how it is. And then they will make these claims off of these three things. Noteworthy claims. Nazis were right-wing. Not that the party entitled the National Socialist Workers' Party wasn't socialist. Wasn't that they promoted socialism left and right. They did. That's what the Nazis were. They were socialist. And they were socialists from the same Frankfurt School that produced progressivism. And they believed, guess what? Just like modern-day progressives believe in conformity. That the conformity is the key to peaceful society, to everyone getting along. And of course the Nazis came to the conclusion the easiest way to reach conformity was kill everybody who wouldn't conform. Right? That was their solution. So, same thing, we have the communists came from the same Frankfurt School, mid-19th century Germany. You look at the communists in Central America, 1980s, conducting genocide against Indians because Indians aren't very good at conforming. I'll validate that. But yeah, it's all about conformity. So, when it comes to race, they buy into this critical theory and intersectionality idea. And it's interesting because it tears society apart. Let me tell you why. Because in the progressive view of race, there's only two categories of people. Those who were oppressed and victims of racism, and those who benefited and were oppressors. That's it. Everybody in society in the progressive view falls in one of those two categories. Everyone. There's no mixing. There's no room. That's just it. There's two categories. You're either a victim or you're an oppressor. And it doesn't matter what you yourself did. It matters what your ancestors may or may not have done. Understand that. There's no escaping it. You can't say, I'm not a racist. Oh, but your ancestors were, so you are. You benefited from their oppression. Somebody who has never been a victim of racism can say, well, I am a victim because my ancestors were oppressed. And this is how it goes, right? Well, the only way that leads in society is to war. And here we are. We're virtually at war. Maybe we're not so much shooting at each other, but our society is tearing itself apart because of progressivism, because of progressive view of things like race and racism. That everyone is either an oppressor or a victim, and there's no other categories. And if you don't fit that category today, you will be assigned one premised on who your ancestors were and what they did. It's absurd. It's insane. But that's how they view the world. It's genuinely how they view the world. Now, they support this by selectively picking out pieces of data from history and omitting the bulk of history, omitting everything else that's ideologically inconvenient to their story. As we talked about the other day with how abhorrent our education system is, this is why our education system is abhorrent, because of what's omitted. So, they'll take these few things and they create a mythology around it. A mythology of, say, racism. That has nothing to do with what really happened. Has nothing to do with reality, with history, with economics, with politics. No, it's just a mythology. But because their goal is conformity, and that is how they view equality, they command everyone to conform to their mythology. They can neither quantify nor validate any of this, but they require people to conform to it, and if they don't conform to it, you'll be canceled. That's how they do it. Socially, politically, economically, you can be fired from your job, whatever it is. That's how they do this. That's how they do this. Conform or you will be punished. Even though what they're asking you to conform to is a mythology that has no basis in truth, which leads us back to the soul-crushing truth that to adopt progressivism or any of these ideas that they share a philosophical basis with, one has to live a lie. One has to live a lie. It's just what it is. So they will divide society up into two groups, victims and oppressors. They will divide it up on economic terms. Capitalism is victims and oppressors. And they will say things about capitalism that are not true. They won't even address free markets at all. But this is what they have to do. They have to divide everybody in society up to oppressors and victims and tear society apart. This is why our society is coming apart at the seams. This is why we're at each other's throats. And it's not any of it based on reality. It's based on what's ideologically convenient for a few people. This is so important to understand. I mean, I've talked the last few days about things like rehypothecation and collateralization and how the economy actually works. You cannot get a progressive to give you an honest definition of a free market. You just can't. And again, it's the whole conformity thing. So here's what they believe. They believe you're anti-capitalist, you're anti-racist, you're anti-this, anti-that, whatever it may be. The list is endless. But if you don't conform to their beliefs, then you are de facto a racist. You are de facto an exploiter. You are de facto an oppressor because you don't conform with their beliefs. It has nothing to do with your actions, your beliefs, your thoughts on race or oppression or markets. And it certainly has nothing to do with improving people's situations. Now, it's true, they want to take from some who they define as the oppressors, and they want to give to those who they define as the victims. But they don't want to actually create more wealth. They don't know how to do that. They seriously have not a clue how to create more wealth. Wealth is the only solution to poverty, which is why all these systems end in poverty. All of them. They end in poverty, misery, and death, because wealth is the only solution to poverty. And they can't create wealth. They simply are interested in taking other people's wealth. You know, various people like Margaret Thatcher, it's been attributed to her saying, the problem with socialism is inevitably you run out of other people's money. And this is the problem with all of these systems that came out of the Frankfurt School. Eventually, you run out of other people's money. And they mysteriously have this belief. People will just keep creating wealth because why? Well, no, people are not going to do that 80 or 100 hours a week to start a new company, to create new wealth. If That wealth is going to be taken and given to the guy who doesn't work at all or works 20 hours a week or whatever. No, no, this is why liberty and freedom is the answer, not progressivism. This is why everyone should have the hurdles removed, the fees, the taxes, the legislation, the regulations, the licensing, all of that to them making a living, to them building their own wealth. But that's not what we do. And every time, going back, certainly starting with Woodrow Wilson, speeding up with FDR, hitting its stride with LBJ and Nixon, we have, every time we think, well, we're going to pass laws to help these people, all we do is hinder them. All we do is hinder them. So, why don't we stop doing that? Why don't we just create an even playing field where we get rid of these laws, we get rid of these regulations, fees, taxes, licensing, all of that stuff, so everyone has an equal shot at building their own wealth. Because you can do that, and there are people who help you do that. But if what you're interested in is using fiction to justify taking other people's wealth by assigning them the category of oppressor because of their skin color, their last name, or whatever it may be, you're embracing one of the worst ideas in the history of mankind. And progressivism is one of the worst ideas in the history of mankind. So, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.